Hello and welcome to Wellness with John. I'm John Peters. I'm a therapist who's been in practice for over 25 years, working with thousands of patients. And this channel is to share resources with you to help you thrive. So, if you're watching this video, it might be because your partner recently asked you to go to therapy and you want to see what I have to say about it. So, stay tuned. Okay, so I mentioned my name's John Peters. I'm a therapist. I've been in practice for over 25 years. I've worked with thousands of patients. I have worked with hundreds and hundreds of couples and families, and I've provided over 250 in-person divorce workshops to over 5,000 parents. And I've worked with a lot of people over the years who have said, I'm trying to get my partner to go to therapy, and they won't go. And so I'm making this video because if you're one of the people who has a partner who's asked you to go to therapy and you're not sure that you want to do that or you think you don't want to do it, I want to just share some thoughts I have about the reasons that a lot of people are resistant to going to therapy. And the reason is that if this video even reaches one person and helps allay those fears and helps facilitate an openness to getting support and then getting a good outcome for yourself or for your relationship, then this is worth it, right? Because I truly believe that a lot of people go for months and years even resisting going to getting support either for themselves as an individual or getting couples counseling and prolonging a lot of unnecessary misery and even damaging relationships and even not saving relationships that could have been saved with some good, competent guidance and support from a therapist. And so, I want to try to address some of your concerns in this video so that if you have one of those barriers to going and getting support, maybe what I say will help you think carefully about it in order to proceed and if it can be helpful to access some good services for yourself or for you and your partner, right? So I've heard this issue so many times over the years. My partner won't go to therapy. And it's kind of interesting being a therapist because part of what we learn is we learn a lot about why people don't want to see us, which is why I'm making this video. It's an informed video because I have learned a lot about the reasons that people avoid coming to talk with me, right? And a lot of those reasons are fine, right? For example, the fact that you're watching this video does not automatically mean that I think you should be in therapy. I don't know you. I don't have that judgment. And even if I did, you're going to do what you're going to do. I'm not in control of your life, nor do I want to be. So a lot of people have valid reasons to not see a therapist, and that's fine. But again, the reason I'm making this video is that a lot of people don't see a therapist when they probably should. And sometimes the reasons are reasons that could be addressed for them. And so follow me along with this video, and I might speak to one of the reasons that you're not interested in therapy so that you could have appropriate openness at some point now or in the future, right? So let me just say 99% of the people who are resistant to going to therapy, in my experience, are cisgender males, meaning born biologically male and gendered male. And, pardon me if this doesn't include you as a cisgendered male. And pardon me too if these are not your issues, but I'm going to just lay them out there because they actually exist and they are barriers to a lot of males going to therapy. So going to therapy runs counter to a lot of conventional notions of masculinity because I'm weak if I go to therapy, and I don't want to be seen as weak by others. I don't want to see myself as weak. And so if I avoid going to therapy, I can promote this notion of being strong. I'm not going to get into all the details of what true power means and strengths, but I will say that we therapists support people in being empowered and going to therapy likely will make you more of the man you want to be, and it will make you more of the man you want to be in your relationship. And so the perceived threat of therapy to masculinity is probably not the dragon that you think you need to slay. You have more important things that you need to accomplish with yourself and your relationship. And so just know that, I don't think it's a sign of weakness. I think it's a sign of courage. And yeah, I think that's a reason that a lot of people avoid going to therapy. Number two, a lot of people don't want to be seen as weak in the therapy process, meaning that you think that you're going to show up in the therapy, and the therapist is going to ask you to perform in ways that aren't conventionally male, like, let's say, get in touch with your feelings. You may think, I don't do that well. The therapist is going to ask me to do it. Therefore, I can't do therapy well. Well, just get this. We therapists are practiced at meeting people where they are and helping people with the things that we think are important for the therapy process. And if that includes helping you with your emotional competency, we will come, shepherd you through that carefully and with empathy and hopefully competence. And so, will we ask you potentially to do some strange new things? Probably. Will we guide you through those strange new things as carefully as possible? Yes, because we live in that strange land. It's familiar territory for us. So if we ask you to chart some new uncharted territory for you emotionally and psychologically and in your relationship, we're practiced at being that type of guide. So we will help you with that. Another issue with males going to therapy is a lot of males, and this could include you, don't want to see a therapist who is a female. And I'm not going to quibble with that in this video. And I don't think you and your partner should actually quibble with that too much. The reality is, from a resource standpoint, it reduces your pool of potential therapists. So there are fewer male therapists than female therapists. We're harder to get into, to see, but we exist. If it's important for you to not have a female therapist, then go find a male therapist. We do exist, and we exist all over the place. So you might go to Psychology Today or someplace like that and do a search for your zip code to find somebody, or search around online for someone who does telehealth, and you don't have to find them in your local community. But there are male therapists. If that's a priority for you, then get a male therapist. Another thing is, a lot of people are worried about seeing a therapist that they think their partner has already seen or poisoned against them. And so one way to take care of that is just, if you're going to go to couples therapy, don't see your partner's therapist. So if your partner has an individual therapist already, get a different therapist for couples therapy, right? Also, if you're worried about your partner somehow setting it up against you, even from the beginning initiation of contact, you be the one to send the first email or the first phone call to the therapist to ask for services. Don't let your partner do it. And if you do it, then you know what's actively being shared in that preliminary process, and you don't have to worry about your partner saying something nasty like, my husband sucks, and that's why we're coming to therapy, right? You also could ask that prospective therapist if they're willing to do a 15-minute phone call with you so you can have your concerns addressed about the therapy process. You also potentially, many therapists would agree to meet with you individually at the beginning of the first session to give you an opportunity to ask questions and get your concerns addressed. So you can be assertively in control of making sure that the process starts in a way that you can trust and that you don't think is biased against you. The other thing is, if you get into therapy and you start the process, and at some point you think that the therapist is acting in a way that is biased against you, okay, that is something that you can bring up with the therapist. So it doesn't bother me, for example, if I'm seeing a couple and one of the people says, John, can I talk to you alone for a few minutes at the end of the session? And then we talk, and the person says, I think that you're not treating me fairly, and here's why, and this is what you said in the session or what you did, and that doesn't seem fair to me. And then we can have a conversation about it, and if I'm acting in a way that I need to correct, that gives me as the provider helpful information. And if you and I need to come to a shared understanding of the process so that you don't have a sense of being the target of a bias, then that conversation is an opportunity to address that. So you can actually address that even after you get into the therapy process. Now, another reason that people don't go to therapy is because you tried it before and it didn't work. Or you have a friend who said they tried it and it sucked or it didn't work, right? Just be aware that we therapists are widely varied. We're so many different individuals with so many backgrounds and styles and different levels of experience. And so if you worked with someone and it wasn't a good fit, or they weren't competent, or somehow it didn't work, that doesn't mean that therapy isn't going to be good for you. And so I tend to say, if you don't like your therapist, fire your therapist, but don't jettison therapy if you need it. Go get a different therapist who can serve you better. The other thing is, whatever you think went wrong with the previous therapy or the one you heard about, that actually helps you ask the right questions and pay attention to the right things as you're selecting and beginning work with a new therapist. So again, you can assert your control over the type of therapy that you want to be getting and the type that you don't want to be getting, right? By asking the right questions, saying the right things, and if you need to, talk directly with the therapist to express your concerns so that those get addressed in therapy. Another barrier that people have is, I don't want to be labeled as crazy. People see therapists when they're crazy. Therefore, if I go to counseling, that means I'm crazy. People do see therapists for mental health issues. That's a big part of what we do. But when we do couples counseling, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're treating a mental illness. And, while insurance claim forms do require that a diagnosis code be assigned to at least one person in the session, if you want to forego that and maintain your privacy and not get a diagnosis, then find a therapist and pay them privately, pay out of pocket, and don't submit insurance claim forms. Then there's no diagnosis code being assigned, and your therapist is likely to write something on their notes like relationship problems. No surprise to anyone, right? So that's another issue that can easily be solved by just paying out of pocket. Another thing that keeps people from accessing therapy is worrying that if I go to therapy, it's going to open up too big of a can of worms that I can't deal with, and I'm overwhelmed just thinking about it. Therefore, I'm going to not do it. And I want to say, I understand that. I think that's a general issue of why people don't go to therapy, but just know that you can have focused goals and be limited, and it doesn't mean opening up to every possible thing that you and the therapist could talk about. I realize that by the time, a couple gets to the point where they're literally going to their first couples counseling session, so much time has passed. So many of your issues have become very miserable and complicated, and you don't even see a path to unraveling them. And, you're going to go into your first session. It's going to be, let's say, 50 minutes to an hour and a half long, depending on the therapist. You can't even speak to all those issues in that session, let alone unravel them in a satisfying way. And that's just the way it works. But we therapists, again, are practiced in being able to meet people where they are, engage with their issues meaningfully, and craft feasible goals and appropriately focused therapeutic process so that we can prioritize, okay, this is what you want to work with, and we'll work on that. There's this whole universe of things we could work with, but we're not necessarily going to do all that. So just know you don't have to open up to an overwhelming process, and you can keep the goals focused, and that's part of what you negotiate with your therapist in the beginning sessions. What are we doing here? What are our goals? How can we know if we're making progress and achieving the things that we want to get out of the progress, right? For example, when we fight, I want us to be able to not flip out and get enraged, and I want us to be able to communicate clearly, okay? There are focused goals, and that's the type of thing that you can craft with your therapist when you begin. So these are some of the barriers that people have to going to therapy. And again, I don't have an opinion about you because I don't know you, and maybe your reasons to not go are fine. But as I said earlier in the video, so many people avoid going to therapy when the reasons that they're avoiding it aren't real reasons to not go to therapy. And if those are addressed, it makes therapy possible, and therefore people can get good support and have better outcomes. And so going to therapy isn't going to mean you're crazy. It isn't going to mean opening up an overwhelming can of worms. It doesn't mean that you're one final step away from divorce or separation. Many people go to therapy and get a lot of good benefits as an individual in individual therapy and as a couple for the dynamics of the relationship. And that's shown in the research. And so it doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean you're about to have a crisis. It doesn't mean you're about to separate. And I hope that this video reaches you or someone like you whose partner has asked them to go to therapy so that these concerns can be addressed in your head, and so that I have given you good advice about how to proceed to have your concerns appropriately addressed in the therapeutic process. Because I'm sad when I think about the fact that there are so many people who delay or totally avoid getting good support and prolong a lot of misery that is just not necessary, or damage a relationship, or have a relationship end that could have been improved and could have been saved. So you have the opportunity to do that. I hope that this video potentially answered some questions that you might have had about therapy and maybe addressed some of your ambivalence or resistance to going to therapy. Again, if you have comments about this, feel free to leave them below. If you don't want to leave a public comment and you want to contact me privately with a comment, go to johnpeters.online, hit the contact form. You can send me a message there. But I hope this is helpful. If you like the video, hit the like button below. And if you like this kind of content, feel free to check out my other videos on the platform.